Welcome back to Under the Microscope, where we dig deep into law, justice, and medicine. I'm your host, Jasmine Rand. Today I'm joined by criminal defense attorney Jose Baez. Now, we all know Jose from high-profile criminal defense cases, like Casey Anthony, Aaron Hernandez. But today we're here to talk to Jose about a different area of his practice, defending doctors. Jose, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jasmine.
Now, Jose, can you tell us a little bit about how you made this transition from working on these high-profile criminal defense cases to defending doctors?
Well, there really is no transition at all. I often say there's no such thing as a white-collar jury. So when it comes down to it, ultimately the people who will judge your fate are the same people that would judge the fate of some other types of cases, all other types of cases. You know, we have a jury system that's in place in our criminal justice system, and it transcends throughout all different types of cases. Now, there's a huge debate as to whether that should be fair or whether that should be true, but the reality is we always want a cross-section of our community. Unfortunately, doctors never get that type of cross-section because there's no such thing as a jury of your peers as a medical professional. So it creates some unique challenges, but at the same time, the core ways of trying a case are very much the same, so long as you have the ability to take certain terms, certain concepts, especially dealing with the complexities of medicine, and simplifying them in a persuasive manner. And that's really what you want out of your lawyer. You don't need a legal scholar who is well-versed in medicine. To the contrary, you need someone who can actually communicate with a cross-section of the community in an effective way. So really there is no transition. There never was. The type of success that we had from all other types of criminal cases to white collar, specifically both healthcare fraud cases as well as DME cases and opioid type cases, they all kind of came hand in hand with what we do, and it really created a smooth, how should I say, it really created a smooth, I wanted to use the word transition. It really created more of a smooth workflow for us, because I think the way we try cases is very different. And because it's different, the subject matter was more interesting. And I think we're quite adapted at making some mundane medical jargon sound a lot more interesting and more engaging to lay people and jurors alike. So I think that was kind of the process. But without sounding like my mother would accuse me of speaking out of both ends of my mouth, but the reality is that there wasn't much of a transition at all.
That's really fascinating, you know, your ability to understand these complex medical procedures and being able to distill that and translate that to a jury and really convert that into emotion to persuade a jury to find favorably for your client. Now, Jose, tell us about a few of those cases. Can you give us an example of what you're talking about?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest high-profile ones was that of Dr. William Husel. And this was a doctor who was accused of 25 counts of murder while executing comfort care. And it was fascinating in a sense and very groundbreaking, because it put medicine in the hands of prosecutors. Prosecutors were going to decide exactly how much pain meds were to be given to an individual at end of life care. And look, I recognize that there are doctors on both ends of the spectrum, doctors who are very conservative with their methods and their dosing habits, versus doctors who are quite liberal with their dosing habits. if medicine can't agree, it certainly has no place in a court of law. And that was part of the challenge that we had. Because the drug was fentanyl, fentanyl was the F word, or the F bomb, as we used in the courtroom. And there's tons of hysteria surrounding that drug. And tons of people know someone or had a relative or had someone close to them pass away from street fentanyl, when it's completely different from fentanyl being given in a hospital setting. So we had several things to overcome. And then unfortunately, doctors are judged quite harshly. They're held to a higher standard, even though that's really not fair, because doctors are human just like everyone else and like any other profession. So of course there was that case that really that was more of a medical indication type case / opioid case. And then there were also other cases, other federal cases that we've had where we've represented individuals, and specifically doctors and medical centers, in billing matters, dealing with CMS, and in addition to that, cases where the government was claiming that much of the procedures being done were not medically indicated, and then so that's a different shift.
Right.
That's where you have doctors now, prosecutors now, not being doctors but playing one on TV, and then deciding, okay, this procedure was not medically indicated, and this was, and it can get quite offensive. Where lay people are trying to insert themselves in the medical profession, which I'm very, very much against. I think there's amazing science being done in medicine, and I think the doctors who push the boundaries are, of course, the ones that create the new cures that prolong life in many ways. So it's a world of gray, and I think conveying that to a jury is a challenge for many people accused of these types of crimes. And then, of course, you have the massive DME cases where durable medical equipment is it's quite a unique type of case in and of itself. And doctors are getting caught up in the firestorm. So I'll tell you this in terms, as it relates to doctors. You go to medical school, your sole focus is trying to heal and to protect life, prolong life, and that's your center focus. Very few doctors, and even though they may go out and open up their own practice, they're not necessarily schooled, or they don't necessarily focus particularly on the business side or on the billing side. So they hire people who they trust to do these things, and sometimes they get involved as well, but the reality is that's not their specialty, but yet they're going to be held to the highest of standards as it relates to these types of areas, and as well as their prescribing habits. So look, as it relates to DME cases, it's interesting because we're not talking about, how should I say, serious prescriptions,
right?
Where they are life-changing. You're talking about something, a brace for your wrist.
When you say brace. DME cases, for all those people out there listening, what's a DME case?
Well, the DME stands for durable medical equipment. Mm-hmm. And so for folks who may have back pain, they might need a back brace.
Right.
And especially as you get older, there are these companies that are essentially like a drugstore. but it's not, they don't have drugs, they have these braces. And these companies often, they want to sell these braces. So what they do is a doctor will prescribe let's say a wrist brace or a knee brace, and at that time, they could file a claim for it with Medicaid or a private insurance company, and once that occurs, the DME company / pharmacy will issue the brace. And unfortunately, there have been a lot of companies that have been quite successful in distributing lots of these types of braces. Several actors have been quite abusive in that process. Fraudsters have been attracted. This business has been attracted by not only fraudsters, but folks involved in organized crime, and many other individuals. Now, the problem with that is when you've got a bad seed or a bad apple, it kind of ruins the whole bunch.
Right.
So many DME companies who are completely legitimate and have certain safeguards to prevent fraud, that doesn't matter to the government. DME is it's a popular type of case now to prosecute, and and it essentially gets, many individuals essentially get swept up in these types of cases.
Now, one thing I want to ask you about, and I've known you for over a decade now, I've worked beside you, and one of the things that I think makes you so successful at what you do is your passion. So can you tell us where your passion for this intersection of law and medicine and justice comes from?
Well, the beauty of this line of work is that you get to explore other types of professions, and you get to educate yourself on other types of, I guess, ways of life. So, you know, when I represented, for example, Aaron Hernandez, I got to learn about the NFL. I got to learn about how a professional athlete trains. I got to learn about the business of the National Football League. And then I can switch over if I have a new case. Let's say perhaps a financial fraud case. I then get to learn about Wall Street. What are some of the amazing ways of finance and things that very few people will get exposed to unless they're in that business? And then all of a sudden, boom, another situation arises where a doctor may need my assistance. I'm fascinated by medicine. I think it's amazing, and I've never seen a group of harder working individuals than the medical profession. And that, coupled with their brilliance, really make them interesting people to be around. And to hear them explain certain things, it's quite fascinating. And look, I soak it up like a sponge. I've been blessed to represent many doctors and many other individuals, not just doctors, but other folks in the health profession. And it's been a fascinating experience.
So Jose, earlier in the segment today, we talked some about DME cases. Can you tell us what is a DME case?
DME stands for durable medical equipment. And these are devices that are used in medicine and prescribed in medicine. So for example, a wheelchair. A doctor prescribes you a wheelchair or a knee brace, a back brace, something of that nature. And the companies that distribute this equipment is sometimes infiltrated by fraudsters. Either the company can be fraudulent or the company can be completely legitimate and caught up in a federal investigation. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, and sometimes a lot of people say, is I don't have to worry about any of that because I don't go out and commit crimes. I'm very careful.
Right.
Well, they can say that with 100% certainty. But what they can't say with 100% certainty is I'll never be accused of a crime, or I'll never be accused of some wrong type of wrongdoing, or being part of something. Medicine is a collaborative effort. There are multiple people that work within a medical setting. And all it takes is one bad actor to involve the rest, either knowingly, specifically in what they're doing, versus, or even unknowingly. So I think many times doctors and other healthcare professionals fall victim to many of these fraudsters who are quite clever and know how to cover their tracks and know exactly what they're doing. And the only person with their license on the line are the healthcare professionals. So that's basically what DME cases are about. And several years ago, they had this task force called Operation Brace Yourself, dealing on DME cases. As you can see, they get very clever with their operations. But the reality is many doctors got caught up in prescribing these devices, and many times these companies took their prescriptions, their medical number, their provider number, and utilized that by double billing, by issuing certain braces to people who didn't want them or need them. And the person that got caught up in it all were the doctors.
Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about what are the early stages of a healthcare fraud investigation look like?
Sure. And this is I'm glad you asked that question, because it's actually critical for anyone involved in these types of cases. Number one, they usually come to you by way of either a insurance investigator or an investigator from CMS. And this is common. Sometimes you're going to get inquiries as to some of your prescriptions and your either your prescribing habits or questions about your patients. So doctors unknowingly automatically speak with them without having counsel present, and everything that is being said is either recorded, either digitally or with notes, or the individual, the investigator, that specific investigator, now can use whatever statement you make or do not make, or they think you make, in a court of law against you.
So the right time to hire a lawyer is really when you get that first letter, when you get that initial notice.
Yes, I think it's imperative that anytime you have to explain your dosing habits, your prescribing habits, or any questions about specific patients to a third party outside of your medical setting, yes, that's the time to have counsel present, and to ensure that no specific statements get attributed to you and used against you. Now let me elaborate on that for a minute, because many folks out there are completely innocent, and they figure, well, I can just say what I say, and if they misquote me, that's a lie.
Right.
Well, it's a little too late for that at that point. And here's the problem with making statements, and that is that, one, you don't know what statements they're going to attribute to you. And two, once you make a statement, they can say you said anything or didn't say anything. So a lot of times you may give correct information, might be misquoted, or not taken down at all. And then the question is, oh, well, maybe this omission means something.
Right.
And I can tell you, sometimes omissions are equally important on a case, and a case could turn on its head immediately based on omissions or statements made by these individual doctors. The second phase usually comes by way of medical board investigations. So a medical board investigator might contact you. And right off the bat, you may hire an attorney that has to deal with licensing, not knowing that there's actually a criminal investigation working in conjunction with this medical board investigation. That becomes a huge issue because, of course, doctors have to respond to the medical board. And on top of that, they want to respond to the medical board. And the last thing they want is a criminal defense lawyer obstructing that process. I can tell you from years of experience that they're not hiring a criminal defense attorney does not necessarily put you in a position where it's going to cost you your license. Many times that gets facilitated either in conjunction with a licensing lawyer or exclusively or directly with the board themselves. So I've worked with licensing lawyers to get answers to certain questions. I've also answered the medical board directly and have been able to handle and shut down investigations right before they start. And both of those ways are certain ways that these cases can be resolved and handled immediately. Sometimes, and many times, the case is way far along before they ever come to you.
Right.
So that's the downside of how these investigations get started, because this could be going on for years.
So it sounds like one mistake that doctors sometimes make is not hiring a criminal defense attorney from the outset, because a doctor gets these questions in about dosing and they say, well, I haven't done anything wrong and I'm innocent and I don't commit crimes. But as you pointed out earlier, medicine is a collaborative effort, right? So it's possible that mistakes have been made that the doctor's not even aware of. And I think that's why it's so important to involve somebody like yourself from the outset. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those investigation tactics that the government uses that may catch people off guard?
Well, I think there's numerous ones, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Probably the most shocking one is they'll send in undercover patients.
Wow.
So yes, you will think that this individual is just a regular patient. They'll have a different identity. They don't use their own identity with their own license and things, driver's license and health insurance and all of that other stuff that you would normally process a patient with. And they'll have some recording device. And during that process, they're actually and actively recording you, seeing numerous things. How long do you spend, how much time are you spending with the patient? Exactly what was the consult, how in depth was the consult? And also, what did you prescribe? So all of these things, I've seen them in all types of cases. Prescribing narcotics.
Right.
Drug seekers will come in and they're actually undercover agents. Or a situation where someone is claiming that they're in pain and they're giving you obvious cues or really none at all.
Right.
It could be just a normal patient visit, but it's an FBI agent or someone who is setting you up, creating that relationship, may come back a second, third, fourth time, and it's not until the fourth time that they try to push and see if the doctor would be a little bit more liberal with their prescribing habits. That's one example. One of the other things that they do is what I like to call number manipulation. So what they'll do is, I'm actually going to give you a real life example here. We represented a couple of cardiologists who ran their own medical center, and they were charged for either ordering certain stress tests or other procedures that were not medically necessary, according to the government. And one of the things that they did is they utilized numbers from CMS where they would show through all of the billing that this specific doctor ordered more stress tests or more heart catheterizations than any other cardiologist in the state.
Wow.
On its face, that's quite persuasive evidence against that doctor for potential fraud,
Right.
Healthcare fraud, especially overbilling or billing for services that were not indicated. But upon closer look, first thing they do is they kill you and bury you in paperwork. So yes, you now have to go through the billing records of all of these other doctors. But upon closer examination, out of the thousands of doctors that they're pinning you up against, where they say you're number one or number two in the state, they're leaving out the fact that some of these doctors are pediatricians.
Right.
Some of these doctors are dead. We literally found 5 dead doctors
Wow.
in the list of doctors that they said they outbilled. I don't think that would be too hard to outbill 5 dead doctors.
Unbelievable.
And this is the type of evidence that is used in a federal prosecution.
Wow.
In addition to that, they'll also include, ear, nose, and throat doctors. Of course, they're not going to order any heart catheterizations. They can't.
Right.
So the government, quite frankly, is shameless when it comes to prosecuting doctors. Jasmine, it's all about winning. Let's not be confused or live in a fantasy world where we think life is fair, or that the government's going to treat you fair, or that the system is fair. None of it is. And I'm ashamed to say that many times we work in a system that is absolutely corrupt and absolutely all about the alternative. And you might ask yourself, why? Why would prosecutors do this to healthcare professionals? Well, prosecutors and task force, they create these task force and they fund these task forces. So they have to justify their existence, to be quite honest with you. They have quotas, they have to have prosecutions, and most importantly, they have to have convictions. If they don't, they could lose funding, they could lose their jobs, but that's not it. That's really not what I think their main motivation is. And I'll tell you what that is. I think it's more based on big law. Big law is where the money's at. So if you have big law firms, when they hire individuals, who do they hire? They hire former federal prosecutors. And if you want to be a desirable federal prosecutor, you're going to work on these high-profile, high-end fraud cases. Nothing juicier than a guilty doctor. That's quite a feather in a prosecutor's cap. So that's the thing that a lot of doctors don't realize and don't recognize. They think that they're going to be treated like the rest of our community treats them, with dignity and respect. To the contrary, you're just nothing but a target. You're a trophy. And if you allow yourself to be a trophy, the consequences are going to be quite dire.
And that's why I think this program under the microscope is so important. I think educating healthcare professionals to really know their rights, when it's time to get an attorney, and to be proactive about protecting themselves. What you do really puts justice back into law and medicine.
Well, I have been fortunate enough to meet some amazing and brilliant doctors that have changed my life and have also helped people that I love, people very close to me. And it is truly an honor to represent these individuals. I do it with pride and I do it with passion that I think is unmatched, because I'm grateful for the work they've done. I mean, it wasn't too long ago during COVID where we were hailing them as heroes.
Right.
2 weeks ago, the Department of Justice issued over 300 indictments in healthcare fraud.
Wow.
Why are we making them the enemies? Why are we making them targets? And that's because I think, a drive-by shooting at a liquor store or a convenience store nobody's really reading up on that. That doesn't give you any clicks. Mm-hmm. A doctor accused of this or that, doctor accused of murder, a doctor accused of overprescribing, a doctor accused of fraud. Those are headlines that people want to read because you don't see that every day. So the more anomaly the individual,
right,
the bigger the case. A doctor who looks like the person next door, very, very much a target, as well as doctors from foreign countries. They become easy targets. The reason I say that is because prosecutors know that they're easier to prosecute. A doctor of color is going to be judged a little bit more harshly by a jury. Gives that prosecutor that extra advantage where the evidence may be lacking. So these are dangerous times for doctors. That's why I'm here today, because I think they need to know, and I think they should better prepare themselves and guard themselves against something that is should be unnecessary, but unfortunately it is.
So Jose, I'm a doctor. I'm under investigation. I've either been contacted by the FBI or I'm already being prosecuted. How do I go about hiring the right counsel?
First things first, I think you should stay away from big law. And I say that because, unfortunately, big law, and I'm referring to big law firms, yes, they've got a lot of lawyers.
Right.
But you want quality, not quantity. In addition to that, the way big law is structured is they've got two priorities. Really one. Money, 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 money.
Billing.
Somebody's got to pay for this nice fancy building we're in, and somebody's got to pay for all of these lawyers. And that would be you, doctor. So not to say that the way they build essentially is they'll have 5 lawyers meet and discuss your case, and all 5 of them will bill.
Right.
They'll find ways. They are literal factories of billing, which ultimately ends up costing. Now you will find a good lawyer here and there in a big law firm. I'm not saying that they're not good lawyers.
They're very talented prosecutors.
Yes, many of them are. And that's another thing that you need to recognize, is because there is a cycle in big law and government. And the way it works is a federal prosecutor will work their way up and become division chiefs and a fraud division. And then at some point, they build up their resume enough to go to big law, where they will make 4 or 5 times what they made as a federal prosecutor. And what they do is they tout this lawyer. The firm will then tout this lawyer to any prospective clients by saying, look, we have you're being prosecuted by this individual. We have their former boss that works for us. We're going to take good care of you. Well, yeah, that is true. But the problem with that, after being billed to death, you run into a situation where they want to maintain a good relationship with that former office. So many times, unfortunately, I've seen way too many times where clients will be pled out or put in a situation where their case is just not the type of it's not a priority over the relationship,
right,
that they may have when they represent a hospital or somebody like that, or an entity like that. So you have to be very careful you don't get yourself caught up in the political wheel of government, big law, government, big law. And I'll tell you another thing that's interesting too is these lawyers don't just stay with big law firms. They'll be there for a couple of years, make some money, and their relationship with the individuals at the old office are no longer there because because of the turnover.
Right.
So what do they have to do? They go back to being federal prosecutors. Build up, stay there for a couple of years, come back to big law, make some more money, and so on and so forth. It is an incestuous wheel of political money grabbing that unlike anything I've ever seen. So that aside, you stay away from big law. The other thing too is you need to find a lawyer who you know is good in the courtroom. Not that you think, not that someone told you about. You really have to know because unfortunately I think a good trial lawyer is very much like a good surgeon. You have no idea how good they are until it's too late. So I think that's incredibly important. Obviously, referrals from prior clients
Right.
are useful, but most doctors who get prosecuted, they're anomalies. So it's very hard for them. I think what gives our clients some ease are those cases that you mentioned earlier, the high-profile cases,
Right.
where they were covered from gavel to gavel. You want to know what I'm like in the courtroom? All you have to do is go to YouTube and see some of my work. You will know exactly what you're getting when you hire my firm. You won't think, it won't be based on someone else's opinion. It won't be based on a reputation that, and let's face it, unfortunately in the law, reputations are seldom earned. They're more political reputations where someone's popular. Someone puts in spare time at a bar association so other lawyers can refer them cases and think that they're great, they're a great lawyer when in fact they're just great at marketing their business. So it's a factor of trying to know as much as possible.
And I think that's one thing that's different about you, Jose, is that your reputation is really results driven, right? You are results. You are Casey Anthony, you are Aaron Hernandez, you are Dr. Hussel. You're a proven track record. And not many other trial attorneys out there throughout the nation can say that. So from my perspective, that's what makes your firm different. It's your passion, it's your results, and you really care about your clients. What do you feel like, what is the Baez way? What makes Baez Law Firm different from other law firms?
Well, number one, I think it's the passion behind the work. I mean, what are the best, if you want to convey that to any other profession, where are the best teachers? The best teachers are the passionate ones. Who are the best doctors? The doctors who are most passionate about medicine. I think, look, myself included, along with everyone that works for my firm, we love the law and we love helping people. Now, it's interesting too, because when people come to hire me, one of the first things I tell them is, I'm not a lawyer. I say that proudly because I don't believe I am. I'm more of a storyteller. I'm passionate about the individuals I represent. I'm passionate about helping people in their worst time of need. It's something that I've been blessed enough to do, and it's something that fulfills me to no end. So in light of that to me is the focus. I don't really, I have lawyers that can do the best research and write and things like that. I want to take that individual, I want to be their voice in court and stand in front of them when everyone thinks the worst of them, but is not looking at the actual best in them. I think that's incredibly important when you're seeking out an advocate. You want someone to come and be your voice but be it in a passionate, sincere, and most importantly, persuasive way. And this has come through years of analyzing, reanalyzing, inventing, reinventing, assessing, reassessing. I believe in keeping what works, but always, always being on the cutting edge of how to best tell your story, how to best defend you. And that's what I love about practicing in the healthcare fraud area, is because you're exposed to these brilliant people who have big hearts and who have saved countless lives. I don't know any other profession that does that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, maybe lawyers do it on a different level, but never on that level. And I think doctors, there's an opportunity in representing doctors because you have that. Many other professions don't have that story to tell. There are some, but healthcare is certainly a unique one in and of itself. And I do it with a lot of pride, I'm humbled with the opportunity to do it. I truly am.
Now, Jose, today we talked about a lot of the hardest times in a person's life, in these medical professionals' lives. We've talked about going through the investigation process, undercover agents, doctors falsely accused of committing crimes, falsely accused of killing the very same people they're trying to save. I want to talk about a different moment in their lives. What is the moment like for you hearing not guilty? What is the moment like when Dr. Hisell goes home to his wife and his child? Tell us about that moment.
You know, it's always, it's a life-changing moment. And I say that because we take so many things for granted in life. Mm-hmm. Our health is probably the most thing that we take for granted. So doctors can relate to that. What's the saying? You've got 1,000 problems until you have a health problem, mm-hmm. and then you only have one.
Right.
Well, your freedom, your liberty, your good name, those are things to a lesser degree, but they are nonetheless incredibly important. And when you hear those not guilties, I mean, you know, they're the two sweetest words in the world for me. I'll never forget, a couple years ago, I represented a couple of doctors who were charged with 84 counts of fraud.
Wow.
And the reading of the verdicts were quite remarkable because they have to go through each and every one. Because, of course, each and every one is a potential, I don't want to use the word death sentence, but for lack of a better phrase, yeah. I think incarceration is a form of death.
Yeah,
I really do. I mean, it's fascinating, and I'm drawing all kinds of analogies here, but it's fascinating that when someone is brain dead, they're considered dead mm-hmm. as well mm-hmm. as, you know, I guess if their heart stops. So, well, why do we do that? Well, because that's it. They no longer continue to be. I think, therefore I am, right?
Right.
So, in light of all of that, why do they do that? They're breathing, they're healthy, they could be young, their body still works, everything still works except their brain, so therefore they're brain dead, right? You're also considered dead at that point. I think when you're taken away, you're secluded from your family, everyone you love, everything you love, and all of that's taken away from you, and you're put in a box. That's a form of death. And obviously it could be temporary, or it could be for a number of years. One day is too much. Forget about months and years. One day is horrendous. So look, I often shoot to get complete vindication, because it's not only your liberty, it's also it could be your license.
Right.
Especially if you love medicine. It can also be your good name. You know, most doctors spend anywhere from 10 to 20 years in their higher education. And that's a lifetime. That's nearly a lifetime of working towards a goal. And to have that taken away from you, I know what that's like. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've been around it, and it's like cutting a hole inside of you and taking a piece of you away. And I think if the government wants to do that, they're gonna have to go through me first. And I'm offended on so many levels with some of the tactics that they use. And look, if this is my chosen profession, I couldn't be happier.
Well, you heard it from Jose. You put the government on notice. They have to go through him first, and the odds are not in their favor. I can tell you that. So, Jose, I really want to thank you for joining Under the Microscope today. It's an honor to talk to you and an honor to work with you. And you've changed the lives, the trajectory of so many lives. So it was an honor talking to you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.